All right, here we go. It's quite a long time since the last one.
It's been a
3 weeks or
while.
so, yeah. 3 weeks or so. I know you've been busy with like school and stuff. Wrapping up
Yeah,
the
I stayed
semester.
up
Yeah.
all night to write a 20-page paper recently, so I've been busy.
Yikes, that's rough. Anyways, so um, today we have one topic because we know that this topic's going to take a very long time to discuss. So we want to discuss the first half of Andor season 2. Um, so that's 6 episodes to go through, and we have a lot to discuss. We both generally like the show. I know we both have some criticisms of the show, but at the same, but we generally like it. As far as like modern Disney Star Wars goes, Andor I think is pretty
Yeah,
good.
definitely.
Um,
I mean, I think of the Star Wars Disney has made, Rogue One is probably the best Star Wars Disney has made, and I would say that Andor is the second best.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I don't know if this counts, but Clone Wars season 7 is pretty good as well.
I haven't seen that, but sure,
that is yeah. Yeah. Other stuff though, not so much. I thought Mandalorian season 1 was good. I like season 2 as well, and then season 3 is just bad. I wouldn't.
But Andor actually feels like it feels like it's something you actually really want to watch. You enjoy watching it, and it doesn't feel like it's pandering to anything. It's just a well-made show.
Kind of. There's you could argue there's a little pandering going on in this, at least more so in this season than season 1 thus far, but I don't really want to get too much into that because I kind of hate that I sometimes will interpret this of, oh, what random progressive ideology is going to be thrown into here, because like it's just become so common, such a trend in modern media to do that. But I don't really want to get too deep into that. But yeah, generally I think it's a good show. It's certainly a more adult show, at much slower pace. But like that slow pace allows for, I think, better, stronger character moments, stronger world building. Obviously, you can see the budget in this particular show, which is controversial in of itself. Because at least like I've heard, like for me, like why would you spend whatever it was, like $600 million for these 2 seasons when you could have put that effort into like the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which was garbage? Give it more money and more competent people to be able to make a show like that, but they didn't. They gave it to this. Give it to the side character in Rogue One, who happens to be one of the least interesting characters in his own show.
Yeah. We were just saying before we started that, like, in season 1, Luthen was really, like, not the only reason I watched the show, but he was definitely the highlight of the show character-wise. And in this season, I would say it's Mon Mothma who's been the highlight thus far.
And I agree with that. I really liked Luthen's sort of in the background scheming sort of persona in season 1. I've seen like he is effectively the anti-Palpatine, the antithesis to Palpatine. He's the one who is working in the back, trying to get all the rebels to work together. Of course, like Sidious, he worked in the back for years. The Sith worked in the back for years to be able to do that, and I think that there's some similarities with that and Luthen, which I think that's kind of interesting. But I'm not a huge fan of what they've done with Luthen thus far in season 2. I feel like, and they sort of neutered his character a little bit. Though at the same time, he also hasn't done a lot directly in the show, so like that's part of it as well. I feel like his assistant, whose name I don't even know. Do you know Luthen's assistant? Claire, is that her name?
I think so. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I don't even know her name, and she seems to be doing most of the stuff that you'd expect Luthen to do. Which, I mean, I think she's not like an interesting character. Sure, I don't have a huge issue with that, but it does feel like Luthen's taking more of a back seat than I would prefer, at least compared to what he was doing in season 1.
I do hope that in the last 6 episodes he'll tend to come to central stage a little bit more, as we hopefully see the show kind of mounting towards like that beginning of Rogue One kind of era of Star Wars. I mean, we can't be sure, obviously, but I would expect they would do more with Luthen because he was a real fan favorite from the first season.
Right, like his monologue was probably like my favorite dialogue, possibly in all of Star Wars, which is kind of a bold statement. Well, maybe not all of Star Wars, but Disney Star Wars for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, Star Wars does get criticized at times for having kind of poor dialogue, and I think that's a little overblown. But at times it is justified, and Luthen's dialogue showed that Star Wars can have very good dialogue.
Right, I mean, like Revenge of the Sith, which had a very successful re-release, I think the biggest re-release of all time. I saw it in theaters. It's kind of infamous for its questionable dialogue choices.
Yeah.
Of course, the prequels as a whole are, but Revenge of the Sith. But at the same time, though, it spawned countless memes. So,
yeah.
And I think that, yeah, I feel like it is overblown a little bit in the prequels. But like, yeah, it's certainly a factor that I think does diminish them in quality a little bit. But but yeah, Andor definitely the dialogue, at least in season 1, stood out. I think it's pretty good in season 2 as well. We haven't had any like super like deep monologues or anything like that yet that I can think of. Are there any?
I thought some of I mean, nothing of like that Luthen's monologue quality, but I thought some of the dialogue in the Mon Mothma wedding scenes was pretty good.
Yeah. Episode 3 is my favorite episode of this season thus far. Is that do you agree with that, or do you have a different? I know you mentioned.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there haven't been any episodes that I completely hate, and there haven't been any that feel like far and above the rest. But episode 3 is certainly my favorite so far.
Yeah. Yeah, and man, the wedding is such an interesting thing to throw in there. I think it's kind of a risky thing to put in an arranged teenage marriage, child marriage into Star Wars. I think that's kind of a ballsy move to do, but I can obviously the show it's much more mature than anything else Star Wars thus far, which has been a controversy in of itself. Because there were a lot of people. I know Star Wars Theory kind of was like this or that doesn't belong in Star Wars. Star Wars is supposed to be viewable for kids, and
I don't know what was not viewable for kids though.
You're right. Like it wasn't that's kind
if you take
more like the tonal part of it that seemed to be controversial. It's like this doesn't feel like Star Wars. Like I mean, like first of all, like what like 8-year-old kid nowadays stuck on this iPad is going to be able to watch 3 episodes of Andor a week. It might be a bit difficult for them. They might not even be that interested in it because I mean, like I know as a kid, all the kids they prefer the lightsabers. They prefer the jet, the cool stuff, not so much the politics. Kind of this background, I guess, human leveled realism.
I mean, the show like clearly isn't made for kids. It doesn't have super fast pacing. It doesn't have constant like one-line jokes that you don't have to think about. And yeah, it does deal with some more mature themes, certainly, but it's not like anti-children either. Like, I don't think I would have any problem with a kid like 10 years old or something watching this show.
Right. See, I'm trying to find the Star Wars Theory tweet. I mean, Star Wars Theory has been basically a hater on Andor from the very get-go. Just because to him it didn't feel like Star Wars, and I can agree to a certain extent. I think the lack of aliens in the show, I think I kind of agree. Like, yeah, that doesn't feel like Star Wars. Obviously, even within like the 6 movies, like yeah, aliens are there. They're pretty frequently there, but like it's still majority human. Like the Empire is pretty much completely human, with the exception of like Thrawn.
Yeah, exactly. And
Which, like,
even
obviously,
the
is this, it gives us the closest like inside look at the Empire, which I actually really like, and we'll hopefully discuss that later. Um, but I'm not a huge fan of that critique, but I understand where it's coming from. Um,
yeah.
it does feel a lot less like a true separate galaxy with multiple different species, I guess. But like each planet is still distinct. They have very good
Mm.
distinct sets, distinct cultures, distinct looks to all these different worlds, that I think help sort of like it. I don't know. I think it's not the best argument, anyways.
I don't think the argument I don't feel it doesn't feel like Star Wars to me is a good argument to begin with. Like you can make the argument that tonally Andor is different from the other Star Wars we've seen thus far, but I think if you look at Star Wars up to this point, there's already a pretty wide range in tone. Like if you watch the
Mm-hmm.
first couple episodes of Rebels, they're almost
So I
painfully
found this is
childish.
right.
Whereas like you watch the original trilogy, it's a whole different thing. And then the Clone Wars is another thing entirely as well. Like there's not one unified tone in
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars.
Right.
So I think
And like
first of all you can't say, "Oh, it doesn't feel to me like Star Wars." Well, that's just how you feel. That doesn't mean anything. And while you can try to argue it doesn't tonally feel like Star Wars, that's a hard argument to make because there is a range of tone in Star Wars already.
right, yeah. And like obviously, even if you have like Skeleton Crew, for the 5 people that watch that, is definitely a show directed more towards kids. They're trying to give a variety of
Yeah.
subsects of the wider Star Wars audience, something that would be a little bit more catered to them. So this is the tweet I found. This is the one that blew up. This whole conversation, particularly the second, this sentence here is the one that was the most controversial, it seems.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on some level, this is referring specifically to that one scene in Andor,
Mm-hmm.
of which I think most of the controversy is generally
It's a big
aimed at.
nothing burger
Yeah,
controversy, blowing it out of the, like, if you like if you just like read like tweets of people talking about it, then like you'd think it's a lot worse than it actually is.
yeah.
Um,
The scene isn't graphic at all.
no,
Like,
not really. And like this is such like a weird take from Theory. He has, I mean, that's basically like every one of his Andor takes is a little bit off, I feel like. But obviously he is one of the biggest fans in the fandom as far as significance and influence goes. So obviously that's part of the reason why his takes will blow up all over the place.
sure.
But I don't know, like, no, like the thing is this, like, does this scene actually like have a purpose in the show? I think maybe. I think maybe it like, obviously, like the whole thing with Bix is that Bix basically gets tortured by the Empire from, what's his name,
Right.
Dr. Gorst, with the
Mm-hmm.
whatever sound torture, whatever. So does
Yep.
this add to her like her character being afraid of the Empire, um, like taking advantage of her or something like that? Does it add to that? I don't really know, because I feel like even just like the flashbacks or like her nightmares with Dr. Gorst present in them, I think is enough to convey that. So like
Yeah.
personally, if I was writing the show, you probably wouldn't even need this scene at all.
Probably not.
Which I think is probably the biggest controversial part about it, is the fact that, yeah, it's not completely necessary to put in here.
I mean, it's not completely necessary. You can have the show without it, but there are quite a few scenes you could have the show without. And
Mm-hmm.
I do feel that this kind of does add something to the show, not by introducing a completely new idea necessarily, but by kind of doubling down on previous ideas, because on the one hand you have the character development of Bix, and this scene goes to show kind of how much she's suffered at the hands of the Empire, and maybe it's also the beginning of her kind of giving it back to the Empire. Sure. And then on the other hand, I think you also have, like, let's look at how the Empire functions on a smaller level. Let's see the corruptness, not just on the larger, like, Darth Vader and the Emperor level, but also among, like, just the troops and the people leading the troops. And finally, I think this scene kind of shows the fate of planets in the Outer Rim, like the planets that no one really cares about, where there's not as many people living, and the Empire is kind of trying to keep them under control without doing that much about them. So
even then, like, the Empire is, like, so far away from, like, its center, they aren't going to necessarily have that structure, the order that is like kind of define the Empire at its core.
I think it's a scene that says something. Like, it's not completely useless. It's obviously not in there for shock value.
Right. Yeah, it definitely, I'm trying to find one more tweet I saw on this issue. I can't find it. That's fine though.
I guess I would say if there's going to be a controversy about Andor, like, I'd probably rather have it be about that scene than something else, because if you're, like, a parent and you're watching the show with, like, your kid, I get it if you don't want your kid to watch that scene. Like, that's understandable.
To be fair though, like, I feel like a young kid wouldn't completely understand what's going on there.
Yeah, I agree. And they made the scene in such a way that it's not like, if you don't know the concept, you're not going to understand it.
Right, for sure. Yeah, okay. I can't find what I'm looking for over here. That's fine though. Let's just bring this back up. So, there was the other controversy with the whole illegal immigration thing that they kind of threw in to episode 3 as well, which kind of, funnily enough, like the scene we just discussed, that kind of overshadowed any controversy there was regarding the other issue, which is great. I mean, I've even seen, like, people trying to compare Krennic to Trump. Obviously, that's not necessarily the showrunner's idea, the goal, but I have seen people claiming that, because of course they are. But I don't know. Krennic also has not done, like, basically anything this show either. Obviously, wasn't in season 1, but he does play a pretty important role, it seems. I'm kind of curious how much more he'll actually be in the show, or if they're gonna, like, actually, like, focus more on Dedra.
I would expect them to focus more on Dedra. I mean, it's kind of fun just to see Krennic when he is in the show, because he's an interesting character. But he hasn't done anything too crazy.
No, not at all. Yeah, what else is there to talk about?
We could talk about kind of some of the different responses among the YouTube movie critic community to this movie, because I know you and I both watched Master Samwise's take on this and the Critical Drinker's take on this.
Yes, and they seem to be. So, like, Master Samwise, I kind of define as the optimistic critical drinker. He makes basically the exact same content. Oftentimes has the exact same opinion, like general opinion on like a entertainment piece, but it feels like he's a little bit more optimistic and positive, even amidst his criticism. Which is why I actually think he's probably my favorite movie critic at this point, or entertainment critic at this point, if you even want to call him a critic at all.
I mean, I think you can call him a critic, because he does give his critical opinions on various pieces of entertainment media that are relevant in the world today. I don't know. I think you can probably call him an optimistic critical drinker. A lot of times he does kind of express the same general views as Drinker,
Mhm.
but in a more tactful way. But I think there's also more depth to his views too. Like he's just
Right.
not throwing up some
Mhm.
crude GIF and then
True.
swearing like
True.
Critical Drinker
He's
is. He's
certainly a lot
actually
less vulgar.
explaining. Yeah, he's actually explaining why he thinks
Right.
what he thinks and
Yeah, it feels like I
discussing
feel
it.
like Drinkers videos are primarily like or sort of rage baity in a way.
Yeah,
I mean, like
it,
that's kind of the audience that he's built, and that's kind of what people expect from him at this point. And Master Samwise, I think, is much more like I think he's probably like the most level-headed person. It seems like he's not afraid to like say he likes things about like a show or a movie other people hate. He's not
yeah,
afraid to absolutely hate on a film that that people seem to like or point out potential like double standards in like film criticism or something like that. Like obviously like here like War of the Rohirrim, he doesn't like War of the Rohirrim, just like Drinker, just like everyone in that particular sphere. But like even like I haven't even watched this video, but I'm assuming that he's going to be a little bit more level-headed when discussing it.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Some of his videos are really good.
some of them
This
are
one on
really.
Deadra, this video I see on Deadra is really good. Um, uh, he's done a lot of Andor character deep dives, which I think is interesting.
He does a lot of character sketches in general, which I think is an
Right,
interesting
right.
way to go about movie criticism because it
Yeah.
shows he's caring a little bit more about like the writing and the character
Hmm.
side development of it than maybe
Right,
some other critics who are just looking at the movies as a whole. And there's
right.
validity to both
Yeah, like,
approaches, but I
mhm.
do appreciate the character approach.
Yeah, the character like this one, even just like Daredevil, just like a character piece on Daredevil for that
Yeah,
particular show is quite good. I feel like I've watched this video. I don't know why it says I haven't, but I think I did watch that one
I have
at some
not
point.
seen that one. I'm gonna
Might have
have to
watched
go
it on
watch
my
that.
other account, but
Okay.
yeah, nice. Yeah, he's very good, very good. He's also pretty new to YouTube, only 2 years.
He really blew up with that one strong woman
This
video, didn't
one,
he?
yeah, this
Yeah,
the strong woman one, yeah, 9.8 million views. It's
which
a
was
very good
actually like
video.
it is, and it's also very level-headed too.
Right, right. 13 minutes, not too long, not too bad. I respect him allowing Kate Bishop to, who people oftentimes criticize as a bait and switch in the Hawkeye TV show, but showing that she actually isn't that bad of a character if you separate her from the bait and switch aspect.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and obviously he also does like a lot of stuff like in the culture war. He talks about like the male loneliness stuff, masculinity
mhm.
stuff. It's quite interesting. Of course, you have Aragorn. Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to Andor.
To bring it back to Andor, I thought his take on Andor was basically like perfect. And
Yeah.
I think what happened is like I watched Andor, like the next day I watched Critical Drinker's video and I was like, that's
Hmm.
kind of stupid. Critical Drinker, this is like a rare time Critical
Right.
Drinker is like objectively wrong. And then the next morning, I think I watched Master Samwise's video and I was like, yes, this is exactly
Yeah.
right about Andor.
Hmm. Yeah. I haven't. Well, it seems that generally speaking, from the critical drinker sphere, people generally, I mean, obviously they're known for being overly critical at times. That's sort of their shtick.
Yeah.
But like, especially with Andor, they seem to be bashing it to no end. I feel like surprisingly, kind of surprising, I feel like Mahler is seems to be more tolerant of Andor in its current state, and he's possibly like the greatest negativity critic of all time. I mean, you don't just write like a 6 hour video reviewing a Doctor Strange 2, tearing it apart. Where's Mahler? I don't care. All right. Anyways, back to Andor.
Why don't we talk a little more about the Mothma arc in the
Sure.
first 3 episodes? Because that's what's really stood out to me about the
Hmm.
show so far.
Right. And
This
first
was
of all,
also one of the points where I felt the drinker was just wrong too.
yeah. Mm-hmm. So like obviously, first of all, I was quite surprised that the arranged teenage marriage was the backdrop of her entire arc. I was expecting that to be mostly off screen. They wouldn't put it front and center, but they did, which I think is kind of
Mhm.
interesting to showcase that even the what do you want to call it, the like good the better cultures in Star Wars have things that like in our world we would consider to be problematic.
Sure.
Now obviously Mothma doesn't seem okay with it, and Vel doesn't seem okay with it. Of course, the two main characters' reactions to it are negative. So, like, obviously, as
Yeah.
the audience, we're not supposed to be okay with it. But at the same time, I appreciate it being the backdrop because it is like that is the sacrifice Mothma made in season one in order to like what was it for securing funding or something for the rebellion.
I think that she'd been a little bit uncareful in the way she had been funneling her funding to the rebellion, and so it was possible the Empire could find her illicit activities if they did like an audit of her.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the price she's paying to the
Right.
Skolden character to kind of smooth over those irregularities in her
Yeah.
banking.
Mm-hmm. And this is painted as her like major sacrifice that she makes, which that is a pretty significant sacrifice. There are some things that I find interesting, though. Is the first thing that I thought was really, really interesting is the fact that um, her daughter was actually okay with it, which I thought was interesting. Um,
Yeah.
which I don't remember too much like about her daughter in the first season, but like it clearly shows that she seems to have a respect for her people's traditions, and that's sort of why.
Yeah.
And because I thought that was interesting. Because like part of me was like half expecting like them to actually just like throw the wedding off or something like that, and then
Mhm.
it becomes like a huge mess or something like that. Um, but like yeah, I don't know. I was kind of surprised. I was really surprised that they actually went all the way through with it, and I think that it adds a sort of like silent shock value going on in the background to
Yeah, I agree.
while that's the best way to while like you have like these interactions between Mothma, you see her slowly like getting more and more concerned, going more and more chaotic, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I In the first season, if I remember correctly, Mothma's daughter, I don't remember her name, was portrayed as like kind of a brat for the most part, and then she began
Hmm.
kind of moving back towards her
Right.
previous tradition to the point where in this season, I almost wonder if this is meant to be like a criticism of the whole like trad movement or something. Like I wouldn't,
That was kind of like my thought watching it. So I'm just like, is this
yeah.
meant to be like a caricature of the hyper traditionalist movement?
At the very least, I think it's meant to be a criticism of kind of like cultural institutions that may feel out of date, as in this
Right.
marriage ceremony in general, where with Mothma and her sister Val, is Val Mothma's sister? I don't know. But with those
Cousins. They're
characters
cousins.
being, yeah, her cousin, there we go. Those characters being like the voice of reason who have seen what's wrong with it firsthand, and then the
Hmm.
daughter not having experienced that, and so
Right.
accepting it in spite of her mother's warnings. And then I also thought that the scene in season 3, I think, where Mothma's husband like toasted
Episode three.
the
Yeah,
wedding,
I thought that
episode
was
3,
very
that was
interesting
very
scene.
interesting because it
Very
was
interesting.
portrayed as essentially like a hypocritical speech because Mothma's husband is very much not a stand-up character, and yet here he is giving this
Right.
positive speech about the values of marriage
Right.
and fighting for the good moments or whatever.
Yeah, and
I thought that that was a very well done moment.
yeah, the speech I thought was really quite done. Obviously, I don't remember too much about her husband in season one, but he definitely didn't seem. There seemed to be some sort of a strain between the two,
Yeah,
um, and yeah, I thought it was interesting. I kind of, I don't, what was I gonna say? I don't know. I felt like I actually kind of appreciate that they give respect to him as a character to like let him have a moment, even if we're supposed to generally dislike him as a character.
Sure,
I think that's kind of where I'm going at.
that could be, yeah.
Right. Um,
I
yeah.
thought that Mon Mothma's like monologue to her daughter right before the marriage too, with her daughter's like final very harsh letdown to the whole monologue, was another part of this whole
right.
arc that I thought was well done.
Hmm. Right. Gosh, I don't even remember what like. I know exactly the scene. I just can't remember exactly what she said.
She basically says to her daughter, if you don't want to do this, it's not too late to call it off. And I
Right.
wish my mother had said that to me before my marriage. And then her daughter's like, I wish you were drunk, because that's what Mothma's mother was when she was getting married.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I thought it's certainly it's an interesting like I it is quite interesting. Well, interesting is that the right word? I don't know. I appreciate that they're able to build like do world building on this culture, but like with problems in it, but still in a way that like sort of like lets there be a certain amount of respect for the culture in the background. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
like they don't just like completely bash the culture outright. They let the audience sort of interpret. Obviously, they kind of force feed you the view that they want you to have, but they sort of let you interpret what you want to think about this.
Right.
Kind of.
And at the same time, like, Mothma is still trying to serve these people. She's serving as their senator, so she probably hasn't
Hmm.
completely renounced this culture, even if she can see the very real flaws and weaknesses within
Right,
it.
right. Right. It's also kind of interesting to showcase her living essentially a fairly luxurious lifestyle while you have people
Hmm.
like Andor who are very much not. Like whether or not they're actually doing like super dangerous tasks or missions for like Luthen or something like that. Like even without that, you can still like tell that there's a difference in level of living, which I think is interesting. Which is why I think that it's important that you showcase Mon having her own like internal struggles and her sacrifices that she has to make,
Yeah,
even
for sure.
amidst luxury, because like she could very easily just like give up on the rebellion and just like be a even if she's critical of the empire from like afar, if she doesn't do anything, she could largely keep the luxurious lifestyle. But clearly, she cares enough about the cause that she doesn't want to just be like a character in the background. She wants to be a force within it, and obviously, that's going to come with a certain toll and sacrifice that she has to make.
Yeah, and I think that sacrifice was really the whole point of this arc, because we
Mm-hmm.
see on the one hand her having to marry off her daughter into this family she is not at all a fan of. And then
Right,
at the very end, we see her having to have Take Homa killed too, because he's
right.
going to try to betray her, which I thought was just like a brilliant culmination to this whole 3-season or 3-episode
Oh
arc.
yeah, for sure. Um, I thought it's quite interesting to kind of just tie that all like to end up killing Take Home. It's interesting. It
Yeah.
was interesting how they got there. And gosh, what's her name? Whatever. There's so many names that I just don't know in the show.
There's a lot of characters in
A
this
lot of
show.
characters in the show. Oh my gosh. Whatever. Like, I just completely lost my thought now. Oh no. Um. Anyways, what else? What else do we have to talk about with this show? We're 30 minutes in. We've gotten through
Well, I'd like to talk
this.
about the rave scene at the end of the Mothma arc, because this was one of the
Oh yeah.
things that the critical drinker like specifically criticized as especially poor within this season, and I couldn't disagree
Dude,
more.
this is.
I
I
thought
thought
that
that
was
was. Yeah, you finish your thought. You finish it.
it was like the perfect conclusion to the whole this is like as bad as things can get for Mon Mothma, right? We have her in the first season, she's in financial trouble. She has to have it smoothed over by having her daughter marry this random guy who she doesn't like. And then now she has to have basically her childhood friend killed because he wants to betray her. Like, it cannot get worse for her. And we just see her kind of playing out just how bad this is, how much she has had to sacrifice for this cause in the rave scene. And like, I guess I can see you watching this and being like, this is a little bit cheesy, but it's not a bad scene.
Not my thought at all.
Yeah, me neither. It does a really good job conveying like her emotional state at this point in her character arc.
I really liked how like it cuts away, and then like you can tell that like she's getting progressively more and more chaotic in state of mind.
Yeah.
As it like cuts back to Mothma after it goes to like whatever Andor and on Yavin 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
Which that oh my gosh, the Yavin 4 stuff is strange, I gotta say.
It is, yeah.
Like the only like I just sidetracking to that, it was like the only purpose that the Yavin 4 stuff had was that to like I guess to showcase the disarray of the current rebellion. Like, but at the same time, that's this entire show thus far is showing the disarray of the rebellion. How do we get to the unified rebellion we see in A New Hope?
But like, I'll be honest, I thought the Yavin 4 scene was stupid.
I agree that it's stupid. Like that's why I'm reaching on what the meaning could actually be for it. It felt like that's like where like I'm just like, yeah, this show's actually kind of wasting time here. What's going on?
Right.
I mean, I guess I saw one person mention that the scene showcases like Andor's maturity, which I mean maybe it does that, but like I don't really feel that way.
I mean, you can argue that it showcases both his maturity and the divisions in the rebellion, and you'd probably be right. But at the same time, that the scene was like so long, and every single one of the rebel characters was like painfully overacted, and the whole thing just felt really contrived and unnecessary.
Yeah. Right. Sorry. I got distracted a little bit for a second. So, yeah, that was the biggest drag of the first 3 episodes. I just like what the heck is happening here? I feel like there's almost too many plot branches. Like you have to follow Andor, you have Mothma, you have Luthen, you have Vel, you have the guy whose name I don't know at Saw Gerrera now, for no reason.
Like Bix's cousin or something. I don't know.
Like that. I don't know. I mean, you can have Saw Gerrera in the show just as Saw Gerrera. You don't need to like add random
Saw Gerrera
number 37 into that. Like, yeah, I think Saw's an interesting character. I thought I wasn't too impressed with what they've had him do thus far, but he's interesting. He's obviously he is an extremist. He's the extreme form of rebellion instead of the more, I guess, more civilized united rebellion that we see in episode 4. But yeah, I think he is kind of interesting, and obviously he does tie into Rogue One a lot, having like raised Jyn and playing a main role in getting the message from Galen Erso to Jyn. So he's important. They have to put him in here. Curious to see what he'll end up doing, because it's very clear that he does seem to be mostly separate from the main rebel entity in Rogue One. So, and part of me kind of worries that it's just going to be completely separate from the entire show and not tie in much at all, which could be the case, but we'll see.
I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen, and even then, maybe you can justify it by saying, like, well, it shows different parts of the rebellion, and like, sure, but
yeah,
they could tie it in better than that. I know, and I hope that they will.
Yeah, obviously, that like like the main issue I have with this, well, one of the main issues is like the fact that they like I like that they're releasing 3 episodes a week, so you don't have to wait like whatever 3 months for like one episode a week.
Yeah,
That'd be awful. But like 3 episodes, but the way that they split them up, they have a year gap in between each one. At least I'm assuming that's consistent for the whole season leading up to BBY one or BBY zero or whatever they end up with. Um, which it makes it feel a bit of a disconnect between each trio of episodes, um, and I feel like a lot of like character growth won't be played out as well as it did in season one of Andor for that specific reason. Um, like we'll just have to like kind of like put up to guess, but obviously I'm assuming the important stuff's still going to be on screen. Like they're not just going
yeah.
to like throw stuff into the void and make us like try to guess what happens. But yeah. Anyway, I think should we go on to the second trio, discuss more about that?
Probably. I think we've talked about most of the interesting / controversial things in the first 3 episodes.
Yeah. Okay, so the second three, I was not super impressed with. You can make the argument that they're better than the first three. They're a little bit faster paced, but like overall, I wasn't super intrigued. I wasn't like locked in, focused like I was for much of the first 3 episodes.
Mhm.
For whatever reason, I just thought I think that the Gorman stuff can be interesting, but just for me, it felt a little bit. I don't know. I wasn't super invested in it. It's possibly
Sure.
because none of the characters there have had much work done to them. It's like we're not familiar with them like we would be with like Luthen, for example. But yeah, what else happened in the second trio?
I had a little bit more of a positive view of the second trio. Like, I agree with you that they weren't phenomenal, but
Mhm.
overall they were easier for me to watch. I think just because they were faster paced in general.
Yeah.
I guess they felt a little more consistent. Like you didn't have kind of the whiplash between the really stupid Andor on Yavin 4 scenes and then the really great Mon Mothma scenes. And
Mhm.
admittedly, like they kind of okay. The whole lesbian romance thing is like one of my problems with the show, and now
Right.
it's just like not happening anymore, which is
Let's go.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to be like,
um.
yay, such and such characters
Yeah.
dead,
Right. I
but
mean, like I will say is that Vel and whatever her name, what's her name,
Cinta,
Cinta. Like I never really cared about them in season one. Um,
yeah,
I think Vel being cousins with Mon is what makes her kind of interesting. Uh,
sure.
a little bit because obviously she is in the dirt doing these dangerous missions for Luthen, while Mon is more on the civilized political side of things. Which I think that could be some interesting dynamics. Which I think there was a
Mhm.
little bit of that seen in season one and this one, but and we probably see more of that too. Like I could see what happened on Gorman like cause tension between Mon and Luthen. For
Yeah.
that reason, I don't know.
I hope they do create some tension from Gorman because you did have kind of
Right,
the interesting interplay there of Andor being like, yeah, this rebellion is doomed. We shouldn't start it. And Luthen being
right,
like, even if it is doomed, it's making a statement that is going to be worth more than any victory or defeat in the long run.
right.
So I would like to see them expand on that idea a
Hmm.
little bit more. Only time will tell if they
Yeah,
actually
and I
do.
mean, obviously, they've been setting up Gorman for these first 6 episodes from the Krennic meeting with
Yeah,
all of the Imperial officers to what we're seeing now. Somehow, some way, Cyril has become a more interesting character.
right.
Because I mean, obviously, he's playing the role of a spy, But like it also like I feel like I've seen some waning in his loyalty to the Empire. He's started to see some cracks. It's possible that he's just playing the part. Because like I mean, he seemed quite annoyed about the listening device in his office. Was the listening device was that the one that was like tied to the rebels? I don't think it necessarily was, or was it?
It was specifically tied to the Gorman rebels,
Right.
and he knew it was in his office, which is why he
Right.
was calling his mother from the office and trying to portray himself as a character who could be corrupted. So I think he was just playing the part when they were removed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But like even still, like obviously, Cyril is basically infatuated with the idea of the Empire. Obviously, Dedra is a representation of the idea of the Empire. But I think that it's possible that I feel like I could see that break pretty easily. Possibly,
Right,
though.
and
But
now
like he is very upset. Like he's obsessed with it, which we'll see. Obviously, I think that he's a strange character to focus so much on. At least in season one, I thought his arc was rather uninteresting, but clearly, season two is going to do something with him, and I'm very curious to see what that is.
and I think we're about to potentially see some conflict of like, because what Dedra's trying to do on Gorman is actually incite the rebellion, because what she said to Krennic in like episode 2 or whatever is what he needs to take control of Krennic, or to take control of Gorman,
group
is
of
a
rebels
rebellion that
you can
does
depend
the
on to
wrong
do the
thing
wrong
at the
thing.
wrong
Yeah.
time. Yeah. So she's trying to incite that, whereas Cyril clearly isn't on the same page and just wants to like stop all rebel activity.
Right, and that I think that's kind of be where it's a little bit interesting, where Cyril discovers that he, like one way or another, that he's not been given the full truth about what his purpose actually is. That could potentially cause conflict. The Empire he loves so much has been eventually using him, lying to him about his mission. I can maybe see that break. I don't know though. He seems to be incredibly obsessed with it.
He is, but at the same time, this is the last season, and I do feel like we're going to come to some sort of crisis with his character, probably around that point.
Right, and like also with that is like a lot of these characters are gonna die somehow.
Yeah, probably.
Like I mean, Luthen for sure. I'm pretty sure will die.
I'd be very surprised.
I think Bix will probably die as well. Who else? I think is gonna go.
I feel like I think Dedra will probably die.
Yeah.
And
Cyril,
I expect Cyril to die as well.
Yeah, I think.
But like everyone, basically.
Like everyone, because I mean, this is leading up to Rogue One. We know Cassian's alone with K2SO, who hasn't shown up yet. I'm assuming K will show up at some point in the season. Which I think, seeing how close he and Bix are, especially these last 3 episodes, I have a feeling that she's going to die, and then K kind of like fills that void for Cassian in a way.
Yeah, true.
Maybe. I don't know. It's a guess. Yeah, obviously Krennic survives. Mon Mothma survives. Like Andor survives. He dies on Scarif. But yeah, there's a lot of characters who are probably going to meet their demise, which will be interesting, and to watch. Obviously, I think one thing that made Rogue One so powerful is the fact that everybody died on Scarif.
Right. Exactly.
So there's definitely a way that they can make it powerful. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, though. Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna have to wait for the last trio to actually start seeing a lot of the build up come to fruition, or if the next trio is going to be like that.
I would expect that most things will go down in the last 3 episodes.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously. But I feel like there's still so much jam packed. Very curious what the next 3 episodes are actually going to do. If they're going to be interesting stuff, or if it's just going to be more build up.
I feel like the next trio is kind of going to be like the critical one for the overall the overall
Yeah.
verdict on the show, because the first one was really the building up one, and I thought it did an overall good job. The second trio was like kind of accelerating the action, and I thought it did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
The next three, you have to bridge that critical gap between like getting things started and carrying them to right before the conclusion, which is going to be really important and also really easy to get wrong, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. It's what, Tuesday night, so it's coming up
Tuesday
quick. I
night.
can't wait to stay up till 2 a.m. again watching Andor.
I don't know if I'll do that or not. We'll see.
That's what I've done the first two releases.
That's
Um,
understandable.
yeah, because it's so hard for me to avoid spoilers, and I don't want to get spoilers, but
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, but yeah. Is there anything else we got? What other interesting stuff has happened? Not a ton. The whole listening device portion, we discussed that a little bit. We think it's
yeah.
not the most exciting. Like, at least for me, like I didn't feel like any tension during that scene. I'm just like, I mean, either they get it out and then just like problem solved, and then all of a sudden this plot point feels kind of irrelevant and useless. Personally, I think it'd be more interesting if they actually failed to do so, and that, of course, would eventually lead to the discovery and the drama there. Because I mean, obviously, we're both pretty confident Luthen ends up dying. So, how do
Yeah.
they actually identify him?
The best part of that scene was Mothma and Krennic kind of taking like very
Taking
thinly
jabs.
veiled jabs at each
Mhm.
other.
Right.
That was great. The rest of the scene was just kind of like, why are we here?
Yeah. Right. It is. It felt a little bit strange, for sure. But I mean, it's not. It's not like it does showcase that, like, what do I want to say? Like, there's obviously risks. Like, there's going to be footprints out there that lead to Luthen. This is
Mm-hmm.
one of them. Something else will probably end up happening, and Luthen will get discovered at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. Hmm. Yeah, it was such a strange scene. Like, I think like Lonnie is an interesting character, being
Yeah, I
the
like Lonnie as
a
a
spy. I
character.
think he's very deep into the Empire, which makes him very valuable to Luthen. And I honestly think that, like, if I were Luthen, I wouldn't want him risking for something like this. I would want him to stay.
Yeah,
So
me
that feels a
neither.
little bit strange.
I
But
mean, that was Clea's initiative, though, not
right,
Luthen's.
true.
And then, of course, like the thing had to get stuck too. They couldn't just pull it out and leave.
Like, they tried. It felt like they tried so hard to like add tension. I'm just like, okay,
Yeah,
great. It's like what's gonna happen in here? Um, like, yeah, it's strange. It was. Yeah, I did think it was interesting to see Mothma and Krennic uh, sort of argue. It was interesting. It was interesting seeing Krennic in a, what do you want, like more informal light, I guess you could say. But like, you can tell that
yeah, not on the
he's still this Imperial director. But
job.
like, he's not in the typical oversimplified Empire environment.
Yeah,
Or I don't
exactly.
know. It's I'm very curious to see what they do with Krennic here. Like, part of me feels like we might not even see him much anymore the rest of the season. Like, you
I
had
wouldn't.
him, like, he is such a high ranked official in the Empire that for him to focus on the thing specifically for this show feels a little strange. Obviously, we know the plans on Gorman are pretty important, but like, he has delegated people to run that. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're 55 minutes in.
Um, do we want to talk more about Andor? Because I'm sure we could, but we
We
may have
could,
said
yeah.
most of the relevant things about it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. My favorite Andor arc is still the prison arc from season 1.
Yeah, me too.
That's probably everybody's opinion. I've never heard someone with a different opinion thus far.
I'm sure it is. I mean, Kino Loy is just
Kino,
that's the guy's
yeah,
name, right? Yeah,
yes,
he's
Kino
great.
Loy. Andy Serkis is just too good.
Yeah,
I don't know a bad role from him. Uh,
me neither.
yeah. Anyways, what else can we talk about? Revenge of the Sith was successful. We mentioned that. I saw it in the re-release. That was very fun to see that on the big
I
screen.
I
Obviously,
sadly did not get
I
to
would
see.
say Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie. Followed probably by Rogue One. Uh, Probably. I don't know, cause like yeah. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. So like, but like the thing is that like what do we learn from the success of Revenge of the Sith re-release is that we learn that people like Star Wars, like that Star Wars, even if everything else Star Wars Disney's putting out there is completely flopping. Obviously, it's on Disney Plus, not going to do very well. The movies though have not performed to their probably initial expectations.
Yeah,
Um, so I'm a little bit worried about what message Disney's going to get from this. Of course, I wouldn't mind seeing all of the movies re-released in theaters. Just do a full marathon.
that would be cool, but at the
That'd be
same
kind of cool.
time, like that, it's just such a blatant cash grab at that point.
True, true. Of course, yeah. Disney gets more money. Hooray!
Yeah,
But like, it also shows them like, hey, people like this Star Wars. They like George Lucas Star Wars, despite its
right.
flaws. Um, and perhaps Disney will take a look at what make these movies so special to the fandom. Like, okay, they're not critically acclaimed, sure, but like, what do they make special? Well, it's gonna be obviously Anakin. Um, is the one that ties the prequels to. He ties the whole like 6 movies together. He's the main character. Anakin, you have all the Jedi, the Sith, the sort of formality of all of that dynamic, the lightsabers. What else makes it significant? Well, it makes it significant because it is directly tied to the original trilogy by having the original creator create them.
Right.
And obviously, like some things are like yeah, like midichlorians, which is still somewhat controversial. I think that's kind of a
Mhm.
stupid controversy, but fair enough. Because I like the argument with midichlorians is it removes the mysticism part of the force, but like in my opinion, it actually just doesn't at all do that. The force is
Yeah.
still very mysterious. It just is that like, oh yeah, this is how some people are Jedi and others are not, and I think that
Also,
makes
like
sense.
when you have technology in Star Wars, if you actually sit down and think about them, like just moving things with their minds with no other explanation for it, it seems a little bit inconsistent.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but like people like the prequels now. Obviously, the prequels seem to be much more hated back then than they are now, possibly due to, or likely due to the sequel trilogy, making people recognize how good we had it during the prequel era. I shouldn't even put we
Yeah,
in there. I'm too young for the pre. But
I
like,
I was born after the prequels came out.
yeah. What was? I mean, if this is 20th anniversary, I'm 20, so I was probably born around the time Revenge of the Sith came out. Or pretty same year or whatever. But
Oh, yeah, that could be then. I was born before all but one of the prequels, maybe.
yeah, and I mean,
Is it
you're not going to
20?
see the movie at like 9 months old or whatever the heck. So
Well,
like,
yeah, right.
so effectively, we're young for those, and we're the
Mhm.
generation of the sequels.
Yay.
Hooray! The sequels who need no introduction. Um, we can bash
Somehow
them
Star Wars
anytime we want.
returned.
Somehow Star Wars returned. Let's completely destroy Han Solo as a character, Luke Skywalker as a character. Let's just add the worst dialogue known to man in the last movie because we don't know what we're doing.
Yup.
Let's introduce a big bad, then kill him off unceremoniously in the second one. And then somehow Palpatine return. They fly now. Rey Skywalker.
Yeah.
And then they made Rogue One, which was
Rogue
good.
One's great.
Yeah. I kind of wish it wasn't good, but it is good. And I'll tell you why it's good. It's because it's sandwiched between in such a small period that like you can't stray from the lore. You can't really break the lore too much. From that. That's why.
It's also like very down to earth. Like
true.
And
true, grounded, much more human. It removes
it
removes like the force, the mystical aspects of Star Wars to a certain extent. Obviously, you have what's his name?
Chirrut.
Yeah, Chirrut.
Yeah,
who is not a Jedi, but he is he's a fanatic of the Force. He has a reverence for it, I guess you could say. Which I think.
I mean, it's implied throughout the movie that the Force is at work in what they're able to do, even if it's not like super explicit.
Right. And like even something like that adds a lot to the movie, and obviously you have the legendary Vader hallway scene to round it out, which is still great. Yay, Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, we're at an hour now. We probably
we are. We probably should.
Too much more Star Wars, even though we easily could.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've talked about enough. We'll be back maybe next week. I don't know how many weeks do you have left this semester.
I have 1 week of classes left, and then finals week. But I should be able to do a show next week.
Next week, I should be able to as well. So we'll discuss episodes 6 through 9 or 7 through 9 next week.
Yep.
So, yeah, thank you all for watching. We'll see you then.
See you later.